Welcome back to Atlantic Fellows Conversations from the Climate Action Convening in Bogotá, Colombia. I'm Fionnuala Sweeney. In this podcast, we hear from Atlantic Fellow Johnny Miller from the US about his photography project, Unequal Scenes, on inequality in big cities around the world.
My name's Johnny Miller, and I'm an Atlantic Fellow for Social and Economic Equity at the London School of Economics. I was the first cohort in 2017. I have a photo project called Unequal Scenes that focuses on inequality in big cities around the world. I use aerial photography to find the dividing lines in cities between, generally speaking, the poorer areas and the richer areas of cities. So I'm looking at architecture and how wealth inequality presents in the architecture and urban planning and urban design of the city. And it was a big honor that Atlantic Fellows, Atlantic Institute, wanted to use my photo from Bogotá on the cover of the pamphlet for this convening. I came to Bogotá about 5 months ago in April 2024 to look at the city as one of my cities in my project because it's a really interesting place. There's a lot of civic improvements that have happened in Bogotá and the urban fabric that are interesting, I think, to look at from above. There's also a lot of inequality still present in the city that you can see from above. So, for example, not too far from where we're sitting here, which is in the center of Bogotá, are the foothills of the Andes Mountains, where these informal and less formal settlements have been created, probably because the city, the way that it was designed, didn't proceed up into the mountains because the territory and the environment was more difficult to build there. So that's where you have these sort of irregular settlements. But right below it, and basically where we're sitting right now, is the formal, richer part of the city, the power center of the city. This is where government is situated, banks are situated, universities are situated. It's interesting, in Bogotá specifically, the government has classified these neighborhoods by strata. So they've assigned a number to each neighborhood, and it's called the social strata system. And it goes from 1 to 6. 1 is the poorest and 6 is the richest. I knew this was present in Bogotá. I went and found the data that listed all of these different neighborhoods and their social strata numbers. And then I tried to find where they intersected. So I tried to find where the 1s and the 6s were right next to each other. I had a driver and a translator, and we went and we found these locations, and then I flew the drone over these locations, and some of the divisions were striking. Not too far from where we are, there's a less formal social strata 1 neighborhood right next to these gleaming golden buildings from this neighborhood called Chapinero, and a university called the Javeriana University, a very popular, rich private university. There's other parts of the city like the Suba Hills where you have probably the richest houses in Bogotá. I found one on sale for 19 billion pesos. I think that's $5 or $6 million. That property, which is on a real estate website, that's how I found it out, is right next to an area with cows running around and poor brick construction, quite obviously a social strata 1 or 2 area. The reason why I think this is important is because these dividing lines kind of reflect how we're constructing our cities. It's a reflection of ourselves. There's a lot of capital that goes into developing a city. It's not something that just happens. So I think it represents an intentionality and the systematic nature of how we create our cities in these unequal ways. Aerial photography shows that really clearly, I think. Bogotá has an incredible public transportation network that seeks to address inequality and promote the movement of people and environmental factors within the network. So very early on in the 1970s, Bogotá was the first city in Latin America and one of the first in the world to introduce the ciclovia, which means every Sunday they close down a huge part of the road network in Bogotá and make it open only for cyclists. So bicycling very early on, even in the 1970s, was seen as a progressive transportation mode to address environmental issues with pollutants from cars, freedom of movement issues for people who may live in parts of the city that aren't served by public transport very well. Private transport is too expensive, but they might have a bicycle. And even gender disparity. So I was reading about how the percentage of people that ride bicycles in Bogotá is overwhelmingly male. They're trying to address that, and they see the ciclovia as one of those components of bringing more women into the cycling network here. Bogotá is really famous for its bus rapid transit system, the BRT system, and that was started only in the late 90s because Bogotá's public transportation network, in terms of the buses, were heavy polluters. They were quite crowded, and it was actually quite a slow network up until about 1998, 1999, when a really forward-thinking mayor came in, Peñalosa was his name, who decided, you know what, we're going to create an entire new rapid transit system. We're going to use buses. We're not going to get sidetracked with building expensive rail lines and metros and stuff like that. Bogotá now does have a metro, but back then they didn't. So for about 1/10 the cost of a heavy rail network, they decided to build this bus rapid transit network, which is now one of the largest in the entire world. And it's got the second biggest electric bus fleet outside of China, which is pretty incredible because Bogotá is not the most wealthy city that uses BRT systems, but they've decided to take a really forward-thinking step, I think, and invest into these electric buses and the BRT system as a whole. COVID also really accelerated the cycle network and the BRT system because they poured a lot of money into the public transport network here as a way to promote equity and to promote transportation in a time of crisis. So for a lot of reasons, I think you can look to Colombia as being at the forefront of equity issues and using infrastructure and transportation networks as the driving force to address inequity issues that I find really inspiring. It's not maybe a city that you would think of as on the forefront of these transportation initiatives that are addressing inequality, but it really is. The leadership of the city government seems to really have played a big role in that. And so I think there's some lessons to be learned there, not only in the types of technology that have been used and the types of systems that they've really refined, like the ciclovia, but also this political imperative and the alliances that have been built politically in the city to be able to make this happen. One of the great initiatives, I think, from the BRT system was the development of separate lanes. Bogotá didn't invent bus rapid transit systems. They took inspiration from cities like Curitiba in Brazil and Quito in Ecuador, but they really refined it with this system of separated lanes, electric buses, safety around bus stations, making it easy and safe for people to use, and then really expanding the network. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of kilometers moving, I think somewhere around 2.5 million people per day, just on BRT in the city. So right now, looking out the window, we can see traffic on the surface streets, but just underneath the surface streets, and we can see an entrance, there's the separate bus rapid transit lanes, where if you were in one of these buses, you could avoid all this traffic by going, actually in this case, underneath the streets. It's a tunnel. For me, the project of Unequal Scenes has always been about looking at how the written history of humanity is reflected in the architecture of big cities. And in a place like Bogotá, where there are some real pressing issues of inequality and traffic and city planning and crime and inequalities between the social strata, we also see these amazing solutions like the ciclovia, the BRT, the cable car system, which we haven't talked about, also bringing people from the hills above the city into the center through a system that's subsidized by the government through the Transmilenio or the rapid transit system here. Being here at this convening, listening to activists at DEJUSTICIA and Atlantic Fellows discussing the same issues really makes me proud to be part of a network that's addressing these challenges from different aspects. I really see activism as a spectrum. There's photographers needed, there's politicians needed, other types of communicators, lawyers, a whole spectrum of people pulling together to make the world healthier, fairer, more equitable. And I'm just so proud to be here.
That brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you for listening. Next time, we're in Bogotá, Colombia, at the convening itself. The convening was co-hosted by the Atlantic Institute with Colombian human rights organization DEJUSTICIA, which campaigns for environmental justice. Historically dependent on fossil fuels, Colombia is particularly vulnerable to climate risk, with poor and indigenous communities the most affected. The country is showing great leadership in the action against climate change, and we join Atlantic Fellows as they hear about the work Colombia is doing and explore opportunities for transnational and international collaboration. I'm Fionnuala Sweeney, and you've been listening to Atlantic Fellows Conversations from the Climate Action Convening in Colombia. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on and subscribe to the series wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Atlantic Fellows and their work for equity, please go to our website at www.atlanticfellows.org.